Hello and welcome to Piece of Pod, a podcast brought to you by South Coast law firm Warner Goodman. I'm Sarah Whitemore. I'm an employment lawyer and senior partner in the firm with over 30 years of experience. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with law firm partners, business owners, clients and other contacts of mine, and we'll be engaging in conversations about running businesses, career journeys, and how to excel in the world of work. So if that's of interest, why not grab yourself a cuppa, get yourself comfortable, and let's dive in. So my guest today is Kate Llewellyn. She's from the Content Consultancy, and her LinkedIn profile describes her as having a background as an experienced commissioning editor with a passion for digital publishing and experience of driving forward ebook development in an international academic publisher. But these days, she offers copywriting, editing and content strategy services, and she's best known for the Content Consultancy, which we will have to have a little chat about and find out more about. It's all about online social media, a service that she offers for small businesses. So lots there to talk about, Kate. But let's start, as I always do on the podcast, at the very beginning. Tell me a bit about your career journey. What was your first job?
So my first proper job, although I was still at university at the time, but I absolutely loved it, was actually working for Oxford English Dictionary. So I started in the world of lexicography. And I'll be honest, Sarah, I thought I'll finish my master's and that's what I'll do. I'll go and work for Oxford University Press in their English Dictionaries department and everything will be fine. And of course you do that, don't you, when you apply for the job and you don't get it. And you think, oh, what am I going to do next? So I'd had a little bit of a peek into the world of publishing at that point, and I thought, yeah, that's where I want to go. So then my first full-time job post graduation was actually at Hampshire County Council as their publications assistant, which was really interesting actually, because you got to have a little look at public sector work, and I was doing everything, which you don't often do as a sort of first job trainee. So like right from writing content, editing it, typesetting it, and then doing these small kind of publications to actually help teachers of all things. So that was my kind of first then proper job in publishing. And I definitely loved it. And so then I went on and managed to secure a job with Palgrave Macmillan. So probably most of you have heard of Macmillan Publishers. And I worked there as an assistant editor. So I was working on academic textbooks primarily, so for undergraduates. And I loved it. So I was working in a world of nursing and social work and social care and a bit of psychology. And I got to meet the most, fascinating people. In terms of lecturers most of them had had a career first. So their passion to actually write a textbook that would really help the students, the students of the future, the nurses, the social workers of the future, was a really lovely opportunity, as well as seeing the workings of a proper international academic publisher, and actually accommodating some of the books for, wider fields like Australia and things as well.
And so as the editor, were you reading like cover to cover?
So publishing is one of those really funny worlds, because I think it's actually quite hidden. People don't really know sort of what happens and all of the different areas that you can work in. So I was in the commissioning editor kind of role. So I went from assistant to commissioning editor. And with that, you are kind of like the project manager. So you will commission books, which means people will send in proposal and ideas, or you will even come up with ideas and then try and find the right person to write them. You then take it through exactly that. So you get a draft and you would have a look at it. You also send it out to external reviewers, and then you analyse what they thought of the book alongside your own kind of thoughts on the book. And then it's up to you to make sure that you end up with this beautiful, lovely final manuscript that you then obviously have to get through what we call production and to become a physical book. And also you're in charge of obviously forecasting for kind of sales and things like that and making all the numbers add up as well. So I really, really enjoyed it. But what was nice is I was never actually in control of full-on proofreading or anything like that, because that would just cause my heart, a whole book.
In the world of fiction, it could be quite a fun thing, because you just sit and reading a load of books all the time, although some will be less entertaining than others or not up to the same sort of quality. But academic editing, you probably learned quite a lot on all these different areas.
So I was about to say exactly that. That was what was so nice about it, was because they were undergraduate textbooks, they were obviously mostly introductory, and it would be someone just like myself coming into starting their nursing career, starting midwifery, starting to become a social worker, social care, all those kinds of things. And the textbook had to make sense to them. So if it made sense to me, I was a perfect kind of test reader for it. And as you say, it was all areas that, especially especially on the social care side, that a lot of us can relate to, whether it was families, children, all those kinds of things as well. So yes, it was a wonderful job. And at the end of the day, the book had to sort of match the university syllabuses and courses and things like that. And it had to be readable and, easy to get into, really well structured, those kinds of things, which obviously I still do to this day. And that was the bit that I really loved about it, like making it just the perfect book.
Perfect book. And you were still talking about physical books at this point, or were you?
Yeah, so certainly when I first started, yes. But then towards the end of working there, we were doing the first sort of big overhaul into all new books were coming out of both physical and ebook. Yeah. And we were starting to look at what you call your backlist to see which books would be good to go into ebooks. And we were back in the days of, was it the Nook? Wasn't it, Gerald, if you remember that? And very, very specific platforms where you could buy ebooks only, and bookshops themselves were not selling that kind of side of things at all. And then I was also involved in a very early project where we had a book alongside an online course. And again, it was very, very basic, but where we would have individual web pages that you could visit and do some kind of activity, or there would be a video, something we just so take for granted now, don't we?
Absolutely. So I look back over my career and think, actually, how have things changed? Because when I first started, part of my job as a trainee solicitor was to do research. Yeah. And that meant getting physical books. We had hundreds of them, case books, where all the cases that had been through court were in these folders, and they were all dusty and they were crumbling and falling apart and stuff. And of course now, and it would take hours and hours to go through the index and find this case and that volume. And now, of course, you're just searching stuff online all the time, not on Google, but on our legal platform, whatever. So the world of work, and just physically storing stuff, and it's changed dramatically, hasn't it?
I always remember I worked on a book where we had put in QR codes, and we had a big discussion about these won't ever take off. It's so faffy to get your phone out. You have to have a special app. You have to then scan the QR code. Then you have to, and then it's on your phone, but you don't want it on your phone. You want it on your computer. All these things. And you think now we just take QR codes as if they're just, second nature, and the technology's evolved. But I remember doing that and just thinking, I'm not sure this is the way to go. So I was obviously wrong.
And I guess a lot of your old job probably is done by AI now, isn't it? Proofreading and things like
that. So certainly the proofreading, the typesetting is done a lot quicker with that kind of, just design technology has come along so far as well. I think the commissioning editor side of things, funnily enough, is still actually, very, very relevant, because you do need that human to step back, look at the market, where are the gaps, where are the updates needed. But little things like, we used to wait a long time between editions, with law books, you have however many editions, but you'd wait to make sure that, of course, now with ebooks, you can just update it. It's a digital copy, get it reprinted, done. And I think that must be a really different way. Does a book ever really have a new edition now, or is it just a constantly evolving text?
Well, if our receptionist came in here now, she'd tell you about when she started out, that you used to have sort of paper updates that you put into legal manuals that they would send you through, replace this page with that page and that page with this page.
Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it? So how did you then transition from that whole world into the content consultancy?
So it's a little bit of a sad story, really. I thought, this is it. I thought I was in it for life. I was happy being commissioning editor. I could see it was a really wonderful company. There was quite a sort of natural career progression. I thought, yes, I could become head of department one day. It would be wonderful. I think it's worth mentioning, there were other women in the business at the time who had children. They were working part-time and then they come back full-time. I thought, yes, this looks like the place for me. And then they sadly announced that they were closing the offices in Basingstoke, which was where I live very near to, and they were moving up to King's Cross. And it happened to be literally about a week after I found out I was pregnant with my first child. And the thought of jumping on a train and commuting to North London suddenly didn't feel like the future I wanted in front of me. And also, just the money and all of the other things that come with it. So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. They had talked about, again, it seems so funny, but there was this, idea that maybe we could work remotely 1 or 2 days a week, as if it was this very sort of phantom idea that might work, might not. So I kind of, in all truth, I bided my time. And with all these things with big companies, it actually took nearly another 2.5, 3 years before it actually came to fruition. And I decided that, no, it wasn't for me. So I took redundancy, basically. And I thought I would, I had one child, I had another one on the way. So I had 2 young children. I thought I'd just do the stay-at-home mum bit for a while. And perhaps the wonderful thing about publishing is that there is lots of freelancer opportunities. So that was what I was going to do. And then about 2-3 months into this idea of being a stay-at-home mum, there was a very local women in business meetup just in my small village, so nothing major, and I thought I'll just go along because I suppose a freelancer is a bit like owning a business. I'll see what happens. And in all truth, I got down there and there was a beautician, there was a shop owner, a couple of other sort of small businesses like that, and they were all moaning about this darn thing called Facebook. Apparently we're meant to be on now, and someone's told me I need a website, but I can't be bothered to write that. And even the beautician was like, I think I need like a leaflet, like a price list, but I can't, that's not my skill set. And I thought, I quite like writing. I quite like the sound of that. I've got a little bit of marketing knowledge from again with the whole commissioning editor role. You're kind of making sure that the marketing people know exactly what the book's about and what to expect. And that is sort of, as I say, the rest is history. I literally walked away from that with a couple of little jobs that I thought, I could do a bit of writing for you on your behalf, and we'll see where it goes.
And that's sort of a classic, isn't it? Because I'm hearing more and more about solopreneurs or solopreneurs. There's a whole world of them out there, doing advice, giving consultancy, all sorts of stuff in all sorts of areas, which is amazing and great and fantastic. But what they don't have behind them is the kind of business setup, do they? They don't have the marketing department they can turn to, the accounts department they can turn to. And really, that's where you sort of slot in, isn't it? Is giving them that extra bit, because most of their time is going to be spent doing the do rather than working on their business.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing I've found with marketing and particularly small businesses, but I think we're sort of all guilty of it, is it can be really hard to shout about yourself. It's really hard to remember that what you do maybe is quite unique, or it's not something we all do every day, so we really don't know much about it. And it makes it really enticing for me, because I love learning about what they do. I love shouting about actually some of the real basics that they do. Like you say, but when you're doing it all yourself, it can be really easy to think, I've got nothing to say, I'm no different than anyone else. Actually it's really a slog to come up with something to say. And obviously the world of social media just exploded from kind of, me starting out in around 2014. Doing a little bit here and there to then sort of setting up properly around 2017, that it really, it changed for businesses. It went from being, I was at Oxford actually when Facebook first started. So I was one of the first universities, I don't know if you remember, but they rolled it out by university first of all. Yes, it was like Yale and Harvard and that in America. And then it came over to Oxford and Cambridge and things here in the UK. And it was, it was very much just a platform for friends sharing photos, and that was it. And then, jump forward. And I sort of started this second career, and suddenly, it was exploding, where all businesses had to be on it all of a sudden, which was such a different way of using those platforms.
And let's face it, not only on Facebook, we need to be on LinkedIn, we need to be on Instagram, we need to be on TikTok, we need to be...
So it went from being this just Facebook, and then, as you said, and maybe a website, and then maybe you need a mailing list, and then we now need to know whether we want to be on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, and which one do we do them all? Do we not? And it was sort of, I took it as my job to be like, do you know what? Maybe I could just help people. And that's where the sort of consultancy side came in. Could I just help people make those decisions and, do the research and do the do the strategy first. And then they can go, that's where I need to be.
And so that's what your Content Club is all about, isn't it? So, about planning.
Yeah. So basically what ended up was, fast forward and the joy of COVID, obviously, as we went through, I ended up with kind of 2 very distinct sides to my business. So, and that sort of remains to today. So as I said, I started out kind of copywriting generally, and that still has stayed there. So I primarily offer content writing services to, it started off sort of anyone, but now it's sort of grown into those slightly bigger businesses that perhaps have marketing departments, departments, and they just want a bit of support with outsourcing a very sort of specialist content writing task, or even slightly smaller businesses that just, have the capacity to outsource at that time. And I very much specialise. I did used to do a lot of social media for companies, but actually I've moved away and now focus very much on long form content, so websites and blogs, because there has become a whole area of almost like an academic area of learning around search engine optimization, the joys of Google and search engines, etc. And I decided that actually that is something I really enjoy creating, is those longer forms types of content. So just partly from the longevity point of view, it's so nice that they stay and they grow and they work hard for a business again and again. So that was lovely, but it's the joys of when you work on your own, there's only one of you. So I can't do that for hundreds of businesses. I can only do that for a handful. And so when COVID came along, I lost a couple of clients because they were struggling with their marketing, but they kept saying to me, but we still want your help. And I was like, well, I can't help you for free, very sadly. What could I do? So I set up sort of the other side of my business, which is, the Content Club. And that's an online membership, very much with the idea of just for those businesses that can't afford maybe to outsource either even a small bit or certainly not everything, they can come and they've got someone there to ask the questions, rather than going down the rabbit hole of Googling and what should I be doing, when should I be doing it, what is an Instagram reel versus, what's a LinkedIn post carousel. I could, offer them that support in a kind of group setting and help lots of people at the same time. And then absolutely, as you mentioned, as part of that, I found that rather than just teaching people how to post, what to write, what they really wanted was that sense of like community and accountability and help to remain consistent, and also grow confidence. And all of that often comes from planning and implementing that plan, and then obviously hopefully seeing really positive results. So now as part of the club, although we still have clinics where you can drop in and ask any questions, we have guest experts, we have teach sessions, we always have a quarterly planning session, which is co-working, and it's all about making sure that you've got a really clear plan for sort of the next 3 months coming up.
And what sorts of things would people be putting in their plan? What's the idea of this plan? Is it what their message is? Is it the timing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always start right sort of, forget marketing for a moment, which I think because that's what happens, isn't it? As soon as you're pressured to say, right, come up with a blog post or come up with your note, you go completely blank, you can't think. So actually we take a step back and we always look at two things. So just what you've said, like, is there a particular goal or message or thing that we feel like we're not getting across, especially maybe if you're getting lots of inquiries and they're from the wrong people. So what are you saying that's inviting the wrong people in rather than right people? So what's your goal? What's your kind of overall thing you're trying to achieve? And then we take that step down and think, well, what content, and this is why it's the Content Club rather than the Marketing Club, what content is going to help you to achieve that particular goal or aim you've got in mind? And I always get people to try and focus, first of all, on what I would call their long form content, or certainly cornerstone content. So what is stuff that we could create that could be used again and again? So your blog posts, videos, podcast episodes, things like that are going to take a little bit more effort, but they'll have the longevity. And then we can step down and work a little bit more on our micro content to potentially advertise that cornerstone content. So it would be your social media post that advertises the blog or what have you. Other social media posts like engagement posts where you're asking questions, but around that topic. And always we're looking at, when we're planning, what kind of 3 topics are going to help us reach our goal in that quarter. And then hopefully using that to obviously in the next planning session reflect back on whether that did help us to move forward towards that particular goal.
Sounds to me like something you could probably do on an individual basis as well as the business basis. I mean, we're constantly saying to our team, go post on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. But they're just sort of floating in the air and not, some of them struggle with what shall I post about?
Yeah.
And how often shall I post? And shall I schedule a load of posts or whatever? So it sounds like planning is probably going to help with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, for the kind of the content writing side, obviously it's often a question, it's a two-way conversation. They often come to me and say, we want to write about this, this, and this. And I'll say, okay, great. why, what's the goal we're aiming for with this? And actually, can I suggest we write about this, this and this either instead or, and or kind of thing. So yeah, definitely it works. It does, I think, work for all businesses, because at the end of the day, yes, we want to be visible. Yes, we want to be consistent with our marketing, but we want to make sure it actually is doing something for us. We want to make sure we've got a really clear why. And also I think what's really nice is it's sort of cyclical, is that the right word? That when you're going round that, your marketing then hopefully is working hard for you and it is helping you achieve. So you feel more excited to actually do it and more confident in what you're doing. So you do more. And as you said about like coming up with ideas, I think you come up with more ideas because you think, oh yes, yeah, let's draw on that goal and let's achieve this by doing, that or this or that marketing activity, because we know it works.
So looking at the work you've done with the club and with your consultant, are there some sort of common mistakes that businesses make in terms of content marketing?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest mistake people do is what I call get stuck on the content treadmill. And sadly, that is where you're just putting content out into the world for the sake of it, and potentially even putting it out in a space where your audience isn't. So going back to social media, people who started on Facebook, they've got X number of followers on Facebook, they've stayed on Facebook. Actually, their core audience perhaps has probably moved over to LinkedIn as a good example. Similarly, if you're going for younger generations, that switches a lot. So at one point, Instagram was very in and very, fashionable. Obviously, a lot of those people that were on Instagram a lot, they might still have an account, move on to TikTok, for example. So it's getting stuck on that content treadmill and just putting stuff out into the world because you're doing marketing without stepping off and just reflecting on whether that's actually still, engaging with the people you want and still actually achieving what you wanted it to do when you first started.
And so are there very different roles for the different platforms then? So would you say, you don't do business on, say, Facebook, and you do it on, or how would you view the different platforms?
Yes, I would. I mean, in short, because I think it makes it easier for us as business owners, exactly that. I would be, Facebook has still remained really good for communities. If you've got a really active Facebook group or you're part of that, it can be very good for sort of local interaction, etc. It's still got quite a core market there. Instagram is obviously very primarily visual, great for kind of crafters and those small business owners that are doing B2C, so they're selling directly to customers and clients. I think there's still something to be said for that. And then, as you've probably summarised, LinkedIn is still your B2B. So if you're primarily talking to professionals, but also if you're offering something professionals may need. I've worked recently with a travel person, a travel counselor, independent travel agent. And again, we were talking a lot about some of the stuff they were offering is going to probably be more affordable and more appealing to a very professional audience. So we were talking about the role of LinkedIn there. All I would say, is that there's no everybody, this demographic is here, this demographic is there. TikTok being a very good example. I think everyone was like, oh yes, it's just for young people, just for silly dances. And actually, the statistics are showing that there actually is a very large, 50 plus audience now. A lot of businesses are actually doing very well on there, and especially for like maybe recruitment, if you're looking to hire people, your future employee may well be on, TikTok, and actually may have a lot of the skills, the TikTok, the video creation skills that you might be, very useful. So I think there are some generalizations that you can make, but equally you need to really look at your own business and decide, what are you trying to achieve and who really are your audience, really get to know them. We sometimes talk about sort of customer avatars, who are they? And, use that to guide you as to where you put out your content.
And it's a evolving feast, isn't it? Because each of these platforms seems to... LinkedIn was previously, we write articles and we're very serious and we just talk about our career. And now, as you say, travel pictures pop up and what did I do at the weekend? And very sort of, here's a meaningful phrase that I've found or an inspirational quote that I want to share. It's got... very Facebooky in its
it really has. And I think again it goes back to that content treadmill. You can't just say I've always posted on LinkedIn, I'm a professional, we do B2B, end of. You can't do that. You know, there may well be another platform that crops up tomorrow. You may have had, obviously, X, you know, formerly known as Twitter. Obviously, there's some controversy around there. Once upon a time, that was the place to go, place for journalists, place for, you know, really great place for discussions and things like that. All of a sudden, well, we've got numerous, but Blue Sky seems to be getting some of the traction from there. So again, if you were always, you know, an X person, you need to keep an eye on where things are going. As you said, LinkedIn, very much so. I think in a way, LinkedIn is just actually catching up with what the real workplace is, right? You know, once upon a time, we all used to have to come in suits. We all used to have to, you know, be very formal. We had to have I've called our workplace mask on, didn't we? And actually we've realised, you know, that actually people can't carry on like that. And actually to be ourselves is a much nicer way to work and to interact with colleagues as well as bosses, etc. And I think LinkedIn is slightly just sort of catching up with that.
And I think COVID's responsible for part of that, isn't it? Absolutely. You know, we the world of work completely did a U-turn. You talked about remote working and it was all very frowned on. And then suddenly COVID and businesses were saying, go out, you will work remotely. And the dress codes sort of slipped at that time or evolved at that time.
Absolutely.
And so then there's some pluses to COVID if we look back.
Hugely. I think actually as a you know, stay-at-home mum, you know, trying to earn a little bit of money on the side, which is funny enough how I probably would have, you know, described myself at that stage. I didn't think of myself as a small business owner or anything like that. It was so liberating, like those video calls where the children were screaming in the background, and also, you know, not to sort of gender stereotype, but to speak to men who were having exactly the same, you know, and they were like, yeah, we've got the kids. It was that real, like, genuine window into your home life while you tried to be a professional and to work as well. And, you know, I probably before COVID would have, you know, thought twice before saying, oh yeah, I've got my kids at home or one's ill today or whatever. And now, you know, it feels so much just natural. And what's really nice is on the other side of the camera, the person goes, oh yeah, tell me about it, you know, where it's, so I think there's a really nice, change in the workplace from that point of view.
Yeah. Now, many business owners and HR managers, and that's what our audience are comprised of, are pressed for time. You know, we're all up against it, aren't we? So what advice would you give them in terms of creating, you know, impactful content without the whole thing becoming overwhelming?
Yeah, so I'd give two pieces of advice. The first one is looking at what you can reuse and repurpose. So many of us nowadays, because the world of digital marketing has been prolific for so long, have created a lot of content in the past. And we're, you know, a lot of us are guilty for you stick it out, whether it's one post, even one blog you write, and you just leave it there and move on to the next thing. We're all magpies, aren't we? What can we do next? What's exciting? But actually, when you are pressed for time, having a look at what you've done in the past, whether you literally just reuse it again, you know, just tell everyone again that blog post or that video is out there, or look at sort of repurposing it. Could we take that blog post and turn it into a bit of a script for a video? Could we take that 5 tips on X that we put out on social media as separate posts? Could we bring those together and create a blog post? So those kinds of things, just looking at what you can repurpose, what you can reuse, because again, especially in the world of social media, we so often, you know, not everybody in our audience will see that content. So for some people, it will be absolutely brand new, even if you know, put this out before. So that's the first thing. The other thing I'm going to say controversially is do turn to AI. There is so much out there now that can help you. And even the very basics of a content generator, so your Geminis, your ChatGPTs, Claude, etc. If you're struggling for ideas, there's nothing worse than that blank page that you're just sat there trying to come up with something. And as much as I still say, you know, a traditional mind map can be really helpful, asking a question, very specific as you can be, into a content generator can come up with just some things. Especially if you ask it to come up with, say, 10 ideas, even 15 ideas, you'll probably get 3 to 5 that will hopefully inspire you. So use it as a tool for idea generation. I don't think we've got time to go all into I wouldn't use it wholly for content creation in that sense, but definitely for ideas, for research, you know, it can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people sort of moving away from AI. They started with it and then copied and pasted it into things.
Yes.
And now we can all, we're becoming familiar with it. We can recognise when somebody else has done that, particularly if there are American terms used or, you know, things that are not in their normal tone of voice, aren't there? So,
absolutely.
Yeah, but using it as a generator of ideas and then writing your own, you know, from that sounds like an excellent tip.
Absolutely.
So what role does content play really in a business's culture and values? Do you think there's a way that it can be used to attract and retain talent?
I think definitely. So in terms of employing people, I think it can be a wonderful way. I think people think about marketing and, sales and getting sales from it. But actually, yes, in terms of attracting talent, I think there's something to be said for our future employees are very savvy, tech savvy, particularly, I know that university courses, and that's very normal to talk to them about their social media presence, not just LinkedIn. I actually worked with a fashion student, and she was taught to set up her Instagram account, be sharing her designs, even from the age of 17, 18. So building that online presence. And so equally, they're so savvy that they will be looking at your company. They will be looking at the businesses when you advertise a job or what have you. So it is an opportunity to show a little bit of what happens in-house, and not just talking about the job that they would be doing or, the jobs that you guys do, but the social side, the mental health support, the way the management's structured, things like that, any mentoring schemes, things like this can be a wonderful opportunity. And I think what's really nice is in turn, it impresses the future candidate, but also I think it does impress your potential customers and clients too, because I think, people like to work with people and they like to see a company that cares, that, has got a lot going on, that invests in its people, etc. And so content can be a great way to show that off.
And we've often said, looking at our own business, people assume that lawyers know the law. And when they're looking at different law firms, they're looking to see what is the difference between these law firms. Why would I want to work with that one and not that one? And a lot of that sort of content stuff you're talking about could help with that.
Absolutely.
Sounds like quite a big task, though, for one individual. Should businesses really be saying this is not just we've got a social media assistant, it's not just their job, it's actually everybody's job?
Hugely, yeah. I think in any organisation you probably will have that marketing assistant, that social media manager, and it will be their primary job to bring the content together. But funnily enough, I would say that their job is sort of what we do in the Content Club. It's about the planning, it's about maybe coming up with ideas, it's about looking at content that could be reused and repurposed, but actually to fill the gaps of we need a post on X or Y. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get lots of people involved. And actually talking about sort of future talent, and that is amazing when you start, I've worked in companies and you start talking to people and you find out that this young guy's got his own YouTube channel and he's been posting on it for years and he's excellent at editing. And you find someone else who's maybe prolific on TikTok and they know all how to do the excellent transitions and things like that. And that social media manager that you've got or marketing person, they might not have those skills. So why not, draw on what's in, just like we always would in all areas of business, talk to them about, are there kind of some content creators among, people with obviously different job titles.
And I guess also if everybody's posting something, then it gives more authenticity to the whole business culture and so on. If you've just got the one person pumping out what a great place we are,
definitely it can sound it suddenly sounds quite fake, doesn't it? Like, wow, you all sound like the same person. My one top tip, all I would say is yes, definitely get people involved with collaborating on content for a business. The only thing I would recommend, and if you need to speak to somebody for legal advice, etc., is to have two things. So one is some kind of digital marketing policy or digital policy. So make sure everybody is really clear, especially if people have the ability to post themselves on a channel for you rather than it kind of going through a gatekeeper. Make sure you have a really clear policy on what the kind of things that you can talk about, can't talk about, etc., etc. And even to an extent like tone. And then what I would actually have as a side-by-side, because a sort of a formal policy can sound a bit scary, is to have what I used to call back in my publishing days a house style guide. So this can be really, really detailed if you want, or it can be very simple, but make sure you put, what level of formality are we going for? Are there certain words we want to use or certain words we don't want to use? Even down to, do we use exclamation marks? Do we use one exclamation mark? Do we use lots of exclamation marks? What kind of, yes, we are all individuals and we want to be telling stories, but actually as a business, the brand, how does the brand sound? And you can go into even more detail of obviously like fonts and colours and, whether you use photography, cartoons, imagery, that kind of thing too. But I think, for people, especially for written content or even video content, what's the vibe that we want to get across, and what's the kind of level of formality that we're happy with?
Sounds like a lot to take on board, and I guess there's a few key things that you're saying there that if you take a tip from here and a tip from there will hugely improve the content that's put out. So your career path has given you a range of sort of transferable skills. So you started off in a very different world and you've used your skills. What advice would you give to other people who are looking to sort of leverage their own skills into some kind of new industry or new venture?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first thing is to say that especially with me being made redundant, it's quite easy to go, right, I worked in publishing, I need another publishing job. I think the first thing to do is perhaps maybe research a little bit around, thinking about, well, what skills led me into that job and also that sector, and where is there crossover maybe with other sectors and industries that have many of the same skills. I think also just thinking about what you really enjoy. So I love publishing, I love books, I love sharing knowledge and information, and obviously that is exactly what you still do. I still do to this day, writing those websites, helping people to understand about what a business offers and things like that. So I think that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing is, and with kind of young-ish children now, is the world of careers changes so quickly. We've already talked about everything else changing so quickly. So jobs that you've never even heard of are out there. And so again, doing that research, taking that time, and platforms like LinkedIn are amazing that you can, they're quite good actually. If you put a search in for a certain job, they'll draw in quite a few jobs that maybe you've not even thought of, but they can see are related. And actually, that's another good point with LinkedIn. You can list your skills, and then you can also then research by the skills you have rather than job title.
And I love that whole sense of your kind of passion for words. And so my grandfather he wouldn't know this, but he loved words. He used to read the dictionary. Oh. So he had a thick version of the Oxford Dictionary, which he would just dip through and go, oh, here's a word I've not come across before. What does this mean? And he also used to read the Yellow Pages. And he'd say to my grandmother, oh, did you know there's a such and such at such and such street? And he loved that sort of thing. Brilliant. But when he worked in a hospital, he was, I don't quite know what he was, but it's difficult, isn't it, to have that kind of, what do they call it, helicopter vision, where you look down and go, actually, that's what I love. I mean, looking from this perspective, he loved words. That's no doubt about it. And perhaps there would be a job now in that world.
And do you know what? That's the bit of advice I was given. So very nice. When I left Palgrave under the redundancy scheme, they brought in some careers coaches. And it was funny because, not one of them asked me, what do you want to do next in publishing? They asked about my hobbies and my interests, and the same. I'd never thought, to think like that. And I do amateur dramatics in my spare time and love the theatre and musicals. And that's actually when I was first looking, I started looking for jobs in theatre, like in front of house, box office, because I thought, I just want to be around the theatre. Wow, I never thought that I could work in. I don't want to be a professional actor or anything, but could I just immerse myself in a world that I know I already love? And I thought it was a really good way of looking at it. And actually, I remember seeing an advert for a marketing assistant for the theatre, and thought, that could
join the two together.
Absolutely.
I'm just listening to Miranda Hart's book on Audible. I listen to books on my way to the office rather than reading them. Don't have time for reading. And she was talking about careers advice and saying that she went to her school careers advisor, filled out all the forms that you had to fill out, and they said, oh, we think you should be a librarian. And she said, can you imagine me as a librarian? Like the last person on the planet who should be a librarian, doing my galloping up and down the aisles and being very loud as she is, and all. So sometimes the box ticking doesn't get you the job that you actually should be doing.
So can I tell you a very funny story about very similar? So when I, as I mentioned right at the beginning, that I went for an interview at Oxford English Dictionaries to be one of their publications assistants, I was absolutely devastated that I didn't get it. But I actually managed to stay in touch with a couple of the people that I'd done sort of freelance part-time work for when I was at university. And long story short, but my old English A-level teacher was really, interested and amazed at what I'd done. And I managed to get one of the people at the OED to take her for a small tour of the offices. Anyway, she got back to me, a couple of days later and rang me up and said about how amazing it was and to thank me. And then she started sort of laughing. And I said, what's funny? And she said, I'm so sorry, Kate. And I know you were disappointed that you didn't get, that job at OED, but you could never have worked there. And I thought, wow, okay, you're harsh,
Yeah.
What? Why? And she went, because as you walk through the doors, it says silence.
Oh, so...
And she said, I'm sorry, Kate, but you're not silent. You're a people person. You'd want to be talking. You'd want to be discussing the words. You'd want to be discussing the project. And she said, primarily, and she's absolutely right, from when I worked there, they do work in silence. It's like a library. They are doing their research. They are updating those words. And she just said, no. That wasn't for you. And it's funny because it did make me feel a lot better. And I thought, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And obviously I ended up in a world of publishing where it was all about talking to people. It was about talking to the authors. It was about, moving projects along, talking to lots of different departments and people.
So I think, yes, when you go back to those sort of school people or university graduates, people who are sort of saying, I don't know what my place is in the world or where I'm going or what my job should be. There's a whole load more to look at than just... What did you get for your A-levels? Where did you get your university degree
100%.
from?
And I think as well, the best thing about the modern world is that there isn't a job for life now. And think of that as a really, really good thing. I thought my path was in publishing. It's now moved into this world of digital marketing. And I do see, particularly as a woman, once the children are grown up and things like that, nowadays I've got potentially another 20, if not 30 years of work ahead of me. I could go and do something completely different. And I genuinely think if I wanted to, if I set my mind to it, I could.
And the exciting thing is we don't even know what that might be.
Exactly.
Because who has...
that job might not even have been invented yet.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So any final words of wisdom or encouragement, any top tips you'd like to share with the audience?
So I'm glad you asked me that question because I thought it might come up. So I had a good thing. And something that really struck me was literally only 2 years ago. When you work as a small business owner, or actually in any business, I say that, but when you are sort of in a role where the future of the business, the growth of the business is kind of your, within your, when the future of the business is kind of under your responsibility, I suppose. We often talk about growth and about change and about expanding and things like that. And I really struggled to set any kind of goal that once I hit it, I would be like, yes, I've achieved, I've reached it. Instead it was always like, well, yeah, I did it, but now next year I need to do this, and next year I need to change this, and next year I need to grow in this area. And I was on holiday in Italy and it was beautifully sunny and I was by a pool and, it was a wonderful holiday that we'd been able to afford because of, my business doing okay. And I came across I was scrolling on social media and I came across the statement and it said, happiness is the highest form of success. Mm-hmm. And I finally thought, yeah, that's the measure I've been missing. Forget money, forget kind of, I don't know, a whole thing of products, things I want to put out or services or how many people I want to work with this year. Does what I'm doing make me happy? Do I enjoy it? Do I feel that sense of, yeah, this is where I want to be? Or do I hate the thought of it and it sends a shiver down my spine? And that I would say to anybody, if you can just sit there when you're wondering where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, if you're feeling happy, I think that's a pretty good indication.
It's a hard thing to quantify, isn't it? I remember just a few years ago, I think, maybe a couple of governments ago, there was a minister for happiness and they used to measure the happiness of the country.
Right,
I'm pretty sure they did. And I remember at the time thinking, well, how do you put a number on?
Yeah, and do you know what? It's funny because I have said that to a few people and some just don't quite resonate with it. So I would say find that word that does. I don't know whether it's joy. I don't know whether it's like contentment might be a good one. But for me, I can tell. I can tell whether I'm happy or I'm not happy. Does that make sense?
You don't have to have a score. It doesn't have to be on a scale.
No, it's just
it exists.
That's gut. Yes. Yeah. Do I dread waking up in the morning thinking I've got to do that? Right, that's not successful.
I'm going to go Google and see if we did have a Minister for Happiness because I quite fancy the job if we didn't.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because places like Finland and things like that, they're always come out as like the happiest country. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. You think, how do they quantify that?
So our podcast always ends with our audience-sourced question, and it's no exception today. Here is your envelope with your audience-sourced question.
Thank you very much. What does it say? So, if you could instantly become an expert in any field outside of your current profession, what would it be? Oh, actually, I do know what that would be. I would love to be a singing teacher. And actually know. So I love singing. As I mentioned, I do a bit of Amdram and things like that, but I've never actually done any formal courses or qualifications or anything. So if I could just wake up tomorrow and be able to read music, really understand the way the voice works and, a bit more about music, I would absolutely love that. I think I'd have a lot more appreciation for, when I go to the theatre, when you go to concerts and things like that as well.
Fabulous. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Kate. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
And hopefully we'll carry on this conversation offline.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful and empowering. To stay connected, why not hit the subscribe button? Or if you think your friends might be interested, why not rate us as a 5? To be first to know about upcoming episodes, follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram and LinkedIn, where you'll find us at Warner Goodman LLP, or follow us on YouTube, where our episodes are at Piece of Pod. Thank you again. Until next time.